Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about your AncestryDNA results. If you've taken an AncestryDNA test and received your results back, you know that those results come in two parts. Part one is your ethnicity estimate, and part two is your DNA match list. Now, we talked about that ethnicity estimate a couple of weeks ago in part one of this series. Today we're going to talk about your DNA match list here in part two. For those of you who haven't taken a look at your DNA results yet or haven't received them yet, when you go to Ancestry and you click on the DNA link, you're going to get a DNA homepage that looks like this. On the left-hand side, you're going to see your ethnicity estimate. On the right-hand side is where you're going to see your DNA match list. Now, the DNA matches, what we're going to hope to accomplish today is to answer the question, where do all these matches come from and what do I do with them? In order to answer those questions, we just need to have a basic understanding of how inheritance works. We talked about that in a little bit detail in the last video, but essentially you inherit 50% of your DNA from each parent. Two of those, they each inherited 50% of their DNA from each of their parent, your 4 grandparents. You have 8 great-grandparents, 16 great-great-grandparents, and so on. And so little pieces of the DNA of these people way back here at your 7 times great-grandparents have filtered their way down to you. Now, with AncestryDNA, we have more than 2 million people who've already taken the DNA test in our database. When you take the test, we compare your DNA to those 2 million plus people, and based on how much DNA you share, we can then provide you with information about how you are related to each of these people at different degrees based on that shared DNA. So what you're going to get are possible relationships based on the amount of shared DNA. The first category on the match list is parent-child. So if one of your parents or one of your children have taken a DNA test, they will show up in this parent-child category. If you have had no parent or child tested, you won't even see the category. Now, parents and children share about half of their DNA. You get half your DNA from each parent, right? And if you click on any one of these matches, so these are my parents, I've had both of them tested. If I click here on my dad, it's going to take me to the match page with my father. And then in the header there, you're going to see this little I for information. If you click on that I, it's going to actually pop up a box that's going to tell you exactly how much DNA you share with this individual. In this case, I share 3,388 centimorgans across 85 segments of DNA with my dad. We do have a little what does this mean link that you can click, and it will take you to a chart that tells you what the relationships are at each level of shared DNA. If you forget or need a refresher on screen. So again, when you're viewing the match page, click the little I. That will tell you how much shared DNA you have with this individual. And then if you click the little what does this mean link, that will take you to a chart that explains what the different relationship level sharing is. So parent-child is category number 1. Category number 2 is immediate family, and this is always going to be full siblings. So I am one of 5 children. I've had all of my siblings tested, and full siblings share about half of their DNA. It's not always going to be exactly half. As you can see here, these are my siblings, my sister, my 3 brothers, and you can see there's a little bit of variation here in how many centimorgans of DNA we share with one another. And that's fully to be expected. It's always going to be about 50%, and there could be a little bit of wiggle room there, but they're going to be labeled as immediate family. The next category on Ancestry in our DNA match list is close family. Now, close family are people with whom you share about 25% of your DNA. The kinds of relationships that are going to show up in a close family. It's going to be an aunt or an uncle or a niece or a nephew, a grandparent or a grandchild, a half sibling, or a double first cousin. Double first cousins are where a brother and a sister from one family marry a brother and a sister from another family, and then there's children involved, and those children actually, because their parents are full siblings, look more like half siblings than they do like first cousins. But the name for that is double first cousin. So these are the people that you share about 25% of your DNA with. Again, if nobody in this category has tested, they're not going to show up on your match list. Once we give you your match list, more people take the test every day, and now you're part of the database they're being compared to. So you will get new matches that show up on your list as new people take the test and are matched to you. In this case, I have had my dad's sister tested, my mom's sister tested, and my dad's mother tested. And so again, you can see I share about 25% of my DNA with each of these individuals, but that average, that swing is starting to get a little bit wider. It's almost precise with parents and children. With full siblings, there's a little bit of a range. As we move into close family, we start to see a little bit more of a range. And so you can see here with my dad's sister, I share 1,785 centimorgans of DNA, whereas I only share 1,371 with my grandmother. So you have to start thinking about what some of those possible relationships are. If you have somebody in this category and you don't know who they are, consider that they might be one of these possible relationships. The next category on Ancestry is first cousins, and first cousins share about 12.5% of your DNA. But we just label that, just like we label immediate family or close family, the label is first cousin, but you have to think that there are other possible ways people could be related and still share about 12.5% of their DNA. They could be a first cousin. First cousins mean that you each have a parent who was a full sibling to each other. They could also be a great-grandparent or a great-grandchild, a great uncle or aunt. Now, a great uncle or aunt is the full sibling of your grandparent, okay? A great niece or nephew, which means one of your full siblings' grandchildren. A half uncle or aunt, so your parent has a half sibling, that person would be your half aunt or uncle. Half niece or nephew would be if you have a half sibling, and that person's child would be your half niece or nephew. So when you start talking about shared DNA, those half relationships are going to make a difference in how the DNA gets passed on and inherited. So if somebody is in your first cousin bucket, you're either going to share a common set of grandparents, 2 grandparents. You could have 1 great-grandparent in common. You could have half-sibling relationships at any one of those steps that also might cause that. Then we just go down from there. Second cousins share about 3% of their DNA. Third cousins share less than 1% of their DNA. Fourth cousins share half of that. And then we get into that distant cousin bucket where it's even smaller. Here's the thing to keep in mind. Again, people are only going to show up on the match list if they've taken the DNA test. As new people take the DNA test, they're going to show up on your match list if they match you. And so they'll be shown with a little blue dot. And if somebody is on your list as a second cousin or higher, then you're related to that person, and you're likely related to that person in the manner stated. As we get into the third cousin level, again, because that average starts to make such a big swing, there's some variables. Somebody could be on your third cousin list when really they're a second cousin once removed, or they're a fourth cousin, right? So the range starts to get big enough that there's some overlap. Also keep in mind that when you hit the third cousin level, because you share so little DNA with your third cousins, that you're going to start to see that people you expect maybe to be on the list might not be on the list. So for example, if we were able to identify every single third cousin you have in the world, which is probably a lot when you think about it's anybody who has a common set of great-great-grandparents with you. So if we took every single third cousin in the world that is related to you and DNA tested them all, you would only share DNA with about 90% of them, 90 to 95% of them. So there's going to be a small percentage of your known third cousins who you don't share DNA with. Now, at a closer level, that doesn't happen hardly ever, right? But at a third cousin level, that's where we start to see a little bit of this drop off. As you move into the fourth cousin level, that drop off gets bigger. By the time you get down to 8th cousins, you're going to have a lot of them that you DNA match, but that means that there's that many more out there that you don't. So just kind of keep that in mind. So let me just wrap up by explaining how you can work with these matches. Now that you know what the options are, the first thing I would encourage you to do, if you haven't already, is to start a public family tree and attach it to your DNA results. Now you want a public tree because that's going to allow you and your matches to see each other's trees and to work with them so that you can figure out who your common ancestors are. If your tree is private, you're going to have to stay on top of your messages, and people will be messaging you quite frequently asking for access to your tree so that you can work together to figure that out. I have always found that the more eyeballs working on a problem, the quicker it gets solved often. You also want to attach it to your DNA results so that people know who it is in the tree that took the test. Now, with that said, if your tree is public and you have living people in your tree, you're the only one who can see the names, the dates, the places, the documents attached to those living people. Your DNA matches are not going to be able to see. All they'll see is the word living. So if you attach it to yourself, it'll have your username, and then it will have your parents, and if they're still living, it'll just say living, and then it'll have the names and dates of your grandparents if they're deceased. But that's enough to give people information to be able to start to make some of those connections. So you want to make sure you started a public family tree and attached it to your DNA results. And you want to attach it to yourself. Now, in my case, I've tested parents and siblings and grandparents and aunts and uncles. All those people are attached to themselves in my tree. So one tree, lots of tests attached, and the test is always attached to the person who took the tree, or to the person who took the test in the tree, okay? One of the filters that we give you when you're viewing your match list is shared ancestor hints. So you can actually take that big long list of cousin matches that you get, and you can filter it by shared ancestor hints. And what that is if you've attached your DNA to a tree and your match has attached their DNA to their tree, our computer goes through those trees and looks to see if we can figure out if you both have the same person or the same couple in your tree. And if you do, we provide you with this shared ancestor hint where we say, here's a common ancestor in your tree. Now, you could have multiple common ancestors, but this is the one we've been able to find, and this is an avenue worth exploring to figure out if this is where the DNA came from. I always start there because once I can identify who those shared ancestors might be, then I can work with my close cousin matches. Maybe they don't have a tree yet, maybe they haven't started one, or they just haven't put it online. So I'll encourage them, message them through the DNA system to put their tree online so that we can make some of those connections. And the more people that have been tested in your family, the easier it is to verify relationships. Now, in my case, I'm really lucky that both my parents are still living and I still have a living grandparent. So I've tested all three of those individuals. And what that means is that anybody on my match list that also matches my grandma, I know has to be related through her line. If it matches my mom, I know it's related through her line. Now, if you don't have living parents or grandparents, one of the things you can do is you can get first cousins tested, one on each side of the family, or two or three on each side of the family. And then you know matches you have in common with them come from that common set of grandparents that you share. So it just helps to narrow down and verify those relationships. It also helps you validate at each step along the way that you're climbing your family tree and not someone else's. If my mom and her first cousin match at the appropriate amount of shared DNA, then I'm fairly confident that the paper trail that I've researched that says these are their grandparents is going to be accurate. If they have a second cousin match who matches both of them, who is a sibling of their grandparent, then I'm validating the next generation. If I get a third cousin match, then I'm validating the next generation. And so that's just what it is. It's just a process of working your way through your matches down the list, right? The closer to the top of the list they are, the more DNA they share with you. And you just work your way down from there. And as you do that, you're going to discover that you're going to prove out your paper research so that you know that the genealogy research that you've been doing is accurate. You may also discover some surprises, and the DNA matches are going to help uncover some of that, because people lie and records lie, but DNA doesn't lie. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.